Welcome back to another part of the build series, and there's a question that I continue to ask myself, and that question is, are you even a petrolhead if you don't love messing around with a set of twin SUs? Now, when it comes to restoring cars, there are many things I love and enjoy, and stripping down carburetors and rebuilding them is one of them. And there's a question you should ask yourself, are you even a petrol head if you don't get a little bit excited over a set of twin SU carbs, and especially Twin HIF4 carbs? These are massive, and they're going to seriously pump some fuel into that mini engine, and we should hope to see a good horsepower return on it, if they're set up right. But in this episode, we're going to strip them down, and the smell of petrol, carburetors. I'm a geek, I know, but I absolutely love carburetors. I love saying the word, I love the metal, I love the clunkiness, the feel of them. It's just a thing of beauty. It's like a grown man's version of Meccano or Lego. The smell of petrol. Oh, I love it.
The thing that fascinates me with old carbs is the mechanical design for fuel and air delivery and how it's achievable without the use of computers or clever code. In fact, this technology dates way back to 1826, where an American chap called Samuel Morey came up with the idea. However, he sadly died in 1843. Later down the line, a gentleman known as Siegfried Marcus patented the carburetor as a device that mixes fuel and air for use in petrol engines in 1872. This propelled the internal combustion engines forward, where the first motor car was born in 1886. And fast forward another 135 years, you're tuning into me messing around with a set of SU carbs in a knackered old shed.
These carburetors are off a 1972 MGB GT, and it's a great car to say the least. And what a lot of people don't realise is this is basically a single HIF44 carb, albeit a bit smaller in size, but there's two of them, and two of them means more power. Now, to make these fit on a Mini, for all the geeks out there, you'll probably realise this manifold does not bolt straight onto a Mini, because the space between the carburetors is actually a lot bigger. Now, to make them fit, we have to stick them on a different manifold, and we also have to go down the route of shortening the throttle linkages, which can be quite a tedious task. But hey ho, you watching this channel, you know me, I will literally have a go at anything, and I won't give up until I succeed. These are going on the Mini regardless. The other issues we can run into with these carburetors is if they are not sat at the right angle, we run the risk of the fuel float in the bottom of the fuel pot sitting slightly closed or slightly open. I'm not too sure which variant, but if that happens, we run the risk of flooding the engine and overfueling the car. There's two ways we can get around this. We can either modify a manifold and change the angle with a bit of guesstimation, or you can buy a perfectly proper angled manifold to suit this. And then the other route is you spin them round, you can buy angled spacers here where it'll spin a bit and it'll allow the carb to be bolted on in a different angle. I just love carburetors. I love cars, that's just me. And I love beer. So with all the waffle, let's begin hearing those socket sets move, those little parts mechanically clunk together as I pull it apart, and let's just enjoy the process.
The tools needed for this task are rather simple. Nothing more than a few screwdrivers and a couple of spanners. Oh, and it helps massively if you have a nice relaxing beer to go with it also.
So we'll begin with taking these off the manifold, and by doing that we need to undo these bolts here. And just even that sound, just the clunk of old metal. These are nearly 40 years old, these carburetors. And look at them, obviously they're very patinaed. You've got to love a bit of a patina. I'll be putting up a bit of a fight to remove from here. Let's see if we can get our finger in. And I suppose that's the beauty of new cars, isn't it? You know, years ago, everything on these had to be repaired and things were done cheaper. I mean, look at the engineering that was involved in just with these carburetors. They must have took time to make. I mean, look at that. The amount of mechanical parts on this that could go wrong. And to think people used to service these and repair these, that nowadays would just end up in the bin and a new one would be stuck on. But I'd have these as ornaments in my house. You could potentially put a nice clock in the bottom of that, and we're getting carried away. Anyway, stop getting excited over carburetors, Tom. There's the other one separated, and now without plastic, the manifold can go to one side, and we're literally left with two stonking HIF4s. I think the next step will be to strip this down and take the dashpot off. After looking at the replacement kits to rebuild these, everything looks exactly the same. However, the fuel jets in the bottom are two different colours. One of them is black and one of them is white. I've looked online and there can be a bit of a discrepancy between the front and the back one when it's the new colours, and obviously the remanufactured part, the colours swap. So what I've done is I've wrote a little mark here saying F and a little mark there saying front. I'm going to separate everything into bags so we know what corresponds with what carburettor. Springs come with it, and the damper should come off, and it's just, oh god, that smells gorgeous. Petrol. I don't obviously advertise the fact you should be sniffing petrol, but true petrol heads love the smell of petrol. So that's one bit off. It continues. And that is one SU carburettor stripped down, which means it's ready for cleaning. But before we do that, we've got to strip down the other one. And to be honest with you, it's not a task that I'm dreading, it's a task that I can't wait to do. So let's get on with the geekiness. And that, ladies and gents, is two carburettors stripped down, ready to be chemically cleaned. I just love messing around with stuff like this. I don't know why, it's just therapeutic, having everything laid out on a bench and just making things look nice and pretty. There's a lot to be said for restoring something to its former glory. So with all that said, let's move on to the cleaning. So not only is it daytime right now, you'll notice I've got exceptionally long hair, and that's because I've not had it cut since before Christmas, apart from the odd trim on the sides. Trust me, I'm not going back to that top knot, because when I look back at the old videos, it looks absolutely ridiculous. But what we're doing right now is ultrasonic cleaning, and it's a process that I'll explain to you, which basically makes the carburetors go from this to just sheer, utter porn. They look like brand new. Now there's two things we've got to do. We've got to ultrasonic clean the parts, and then there's another thing we've got to do. We've got to wet sand and 3-stage polish the dashpots, and that will take them from looking like this to a little bit more like this. I mean, look at the difference in those. Absolute, oh. So what we've got here is an ultrasonic cleaner, and basically what this does, it's like a bath with like a divot in the top, and it looks like basically a chip fryer when you pull it out. You drop your parts in this, you fill that with a bit of warm water and a bit of carburetor cleaner. You set the temperature to 75 degrees. It will take a while to heat up. You set the time limit. Big parts 30 minutes, small parts 15 minutes, and you simply hit go. And what happens is vibrations, squeaky noises, crystals, it just looks quite therapeutic and amazing. But there is a problem with this. If you ultrasonic clean a part and you take it out, because it's warm, it dries very quickly. And because of the acid or whatever's inside the carburetor cleaner, it causes it to crystallize on the outside of the body or of the part that you've washed. Now, a way to get around that is to give it a squirt of WD-40. Obviously, parts are covered in oil. If you want to spray them, this isn't the best idea. So what I was doing, I was taking these parts out, spraying in WD-40, wiping them down, letting them dry, and then I was giving them a bit of panel wipe, and then giving them simply a dash of high temperature silver paint. And I'll go into how you paint carburetors without actually messing them up in a minute. So we'll get some warm water, we'll throw this in, and we'll hit the go button. Put the heating on, we'll let that heat up, and And then basically the time's set for 30 minutes. When we drop the part in, we simply press go and wait. So we're at 75 degrees. If I lift the lid off, you will see some absolute bit of steam. I just need to basically move those little linkages over, which allows you to lift that out. The water is very cloudy, and that's simply because it's very warm. But we'll take the damper off that carb, throw this in. We will have to do this in 2 stages and turn it around just due to the size of the bath. And we'll just balance the lid on top and we'll press go. So whilst the ultrasonic cleaner is cleaning those bits, just to kill a bit of time, we'll move on to the dash pot. And this is going to involve wet sanding, because as you can see, there are some horrific score and scuff marks in this pot. And I want it to look beautiful, just like the other one. To be fair, they could do with going inside the ultrasonic cleaner, as there is a bit of crust in the middle, but we'll do that afterwards. We'll get this on a rig that I've made with a bit of threaded rod to basically go through, and we'll get it on the pillar drill and begin to sand it.
Once I'd loaded the dashpot onto my self-made jig, it was time to switch garages.
You can see there these score marks. It's going to need a bit more sanding to actually get those out, so I might actually go a bit harsher and use a bit of 80 grit paper on there, see if we can pull them out and make them look a bit more sweet. This is an 80 grit paper, and I'm just going to try this and see if it does get us anywhere faster. There we go. As you can see, that seems to have took out most of the harsh marks in there. I could go to a 60, but I might be pushing it. But you can see the difference between the 2 lines there, and if I zoom it in a bit better, you certainly can tell the difference. See the pigments there? These are the bits that are struggling, but it does look tons and tons better. I think that's as far as I'm going to go with sanding, because the pigmentation there, it actually goes to the back of the carb where you can't see it, and I don't want to sand it too much because it will thin the metal, and these cracks like there that are like pigmented, there's no way I'm ever going to get those out. We'll now go up in the grades of sandpaper, so we're down at 60, so I'll go 80, 120, 300, 400, 600, all the way up to 1200 grit, which should really fine it out, and then we'll get it on the polishing wheel. Things should start to look a lot shinier.
As we start to run through the finer grit sandpapers, the rough scoring from the previous papers should gradually disappear. As the grit gets finer, we should start to see the dashpot produce a shinier finish. However, I still wasn't happy leaving it there. I wanted the dashpots to gleam with my reflection, and I wasn't stopping until I achieved it. But before we get onto that, it's about time we checked on those parts in the ultrasonic cleaner.
Lovely. Right, let's lift this out. It's like a chip pan, and just look at the steam coming off that. Now that's going to be rather hot to touch, so what I tend to do is be a bit of a softie about it and lift it out without touching it, because it will burn your fingers. Also, look at the colour of this water. That is 50 years of dirt just sat in there. Look at the state of that. And it's loosened that. And you're probably looking at it thinking, why is it not as silver as that one? Well, the process is yet to begin, and it involves a Dremel. Ah, it's hot. So now all the parts have been cleaned with the ultrasonic cleaner, it's time to get rid of all that sort of residue and detritus off the carburetor. Now as you're looking at it, you'll probably see there's a lot of intricate places that I'm going to struggle to get into, and the only way we can do it is by using the good old trusty Dremel with a wire wheel on the end. But we need to be very, very careful whilst we're doing this, because with a carburettor, a lot of places are machined together and they're like married couples within engines where there's reams on certain parts so it slots in and nice. If we disturb those reams, then the carburettor is not going to work properly. So what we'll do is we'll stay away from all the internal areas and we'll just go with the outside areas to get rid of any rubbish, and then we'll mask it up and get it sprayed.
With this part, there's not really much for me to show you. It's as simple as preparing the area I'm about to paint. So with that said, I whizzed away with a Dremel, which to my surprise is oddly satisfying.
So I've just given it a quick blast of air to get rid of any, moisture on it, and then I've gone over it with some panel wipe, and I've used this 3M stuff, and it's literally just like a wipe that gets rid of any grease or any dirt, and it naturally evaporates to make sure the panel is dry, or the piece or the bodywork or the carburettor is dry in this instance. So then I've gone over it again with air. It is dry, so we're going to mask it up, and I'm going to cover it in some nice silver spray paint, which should really complement the look of it. I can't believe these are nearly 50 years old and they're coming up as good as this. Which now means there's only one thing left to do, and that's to basically crack this can out, give it a good shake, and get a bit of spray.
With the carb sprayed and left to dry, it's about time we continued to chrome that dashpot.
Now we're going to use this grinding wheel, and we're going to use quite a harsh one, we're going to use a medium one, then we're going to use a really soft one. And to use these wheels you should use wax, so we'll turn this on, get a bit of wax on, and we'll start to polish those sand marks out of the dashpot.
Don't wanna play games out with the moves, don't wanna meditate, girl, but you it's hard.
I personally still don't think that's shiny enough, so we're going to change this wheel to basically a black wheel, and we're going to use a different wax, and I'm going to change it to a really, really soft and floppy wheel and use a really light wax, which should get this looking mirror perfect.
Both mind and flesh, only we know how it goes. We know how it goes, our togetherness. Both mind and flesh.
Still not super happy with them, so we're going to change to a better disc. Put this on.
I don't wanna push and pull, girl, come on, follow me once. Oh, I don't play around.
Just seeing all the little scratches and all the marks coming out of this carb. But let's face it, it's nearly 50 years old and it's going to look brand new by the time we finish with this. In fact, I don't even think they came this shiny when you bought the car. Oh wow, this is really coming up now. Oh, this is, wow. Look at this.
We know how it goes, our togetherness. Both mind and flesh. We know how it goes. We know how it goes, our togetherness. Both mind and flesh. Only we know how it goes. We know how it goes, our togetherness.
So you can see the paint has cured, and with the paint being cured, we'll begin to remove this masking tape. Now it has stuck rather well, I must admit, it's been on for a couple of days. So we'll strip this down, and then something has arrived, which I'm about to show you. And this is what's arrived, a package from Mini Spares, and if you've been following the video, I'm sure a lot of you can guess exactly what it is. It's the manifold for the Mini that allows the twin carbs to be fitted. And the difference between this and the MG one, I'm about to show you. Now with the two manifolds sat next to each other, the difference is quite evident. If I stand this MGB one up and I stand the Mini one up, you'll notice the overall length is smaller and the spacing between the inlets is a lot narrower as well. What we have to factor in now is the throttle linkages, which are these pieces, are basically tubes of metal that go between the carbs, which are now going to be too long to sit on this manifold. So we're going to have to take some measurements, cut them down, and then get the MGB carbs to fit the Mini manifold. I've got a feeling this could take some working out, but we will get there.
Before we move on to modifying the throttle linkages and rebuilding the carbs, we should look back and appreciate how far we've come with this process, as it's important that you admire your own work. And there's also a message I want to give to all you aspiring car restorers. Ignore the people who say you can't or why. Focus on improving your own skill set and conquering your ambitions. There is nothing wrong with having a go and learning along the way. Restoring these carbs has been a painful process, but you know what? I've loved every single minute of it.
After about 3 months of waiting, I've finally got a rebuild kit for these carburetors, and the part number for these is CRK166A. And I tell you what, they're still out of stock on Berlin's or sucarb.co.uk, and I managed to find just this one kit for sale on eBay. So what we're going to do right now is take the old carburetor and make it look a lot like this. Everything's been rebuilt. It's got all new butterfly valves in it, all new stuff. It's got new fuel jets, new fuel floats because I broke them when I was cleaning them out with air. And we're basically going to oil the dampers up and basically do a damper drop test. So this is the bit we've all been waiting for. The nice bit where you get a bit of like 3-in-1 oil on your hands, and you know, it's just good throwing it all back together. So we'll get this kit open, we'll start the other one, and we'll go through, and hopefully these carbs will be ready to bolt on the engine very soon. So in the kit itself, it comes basically with all replacement parts apart from the fuel float, some certain screws and all the springs and all the throttle linkages. They're different. If you do need to replace them or you need to buy them, it is quite expensive. This kit was around £100 and it's basically designed to rebuild all the butterfly valves, obviously your little brass inlet valves, this brass shaft, all your rubber seals. It's also got new gaskets, and it even comes with a little instruction manual like this. Now the instructions are quite vague. It does tell you what to do, but the best thing of all is it's got this diagram, and it's an exploded diagram with all the parts numbered, and you can see how everything goes together. Luckily, what I did before we stripped these down, you'll remember I took a lot of pictures of how everything went, so hopefully it should all go back together very easily. So just as a cross-reference, let me just get into this bag of bits. Oh God, dropped a load of washers there. That's a brand new disc. Now the existing discs, you'll notice, if I have one here, they had these spring release valves on them. Now a lot of people have said that these can cause issues, whether they stick or just letting too much air and fuel in and just really cocking the mixture up. So the person I spoke to that's doing the engine, Paul, said get plain discs, they're a lot easier to tune. And what I found on these carburetors was somebody has actually soldered the valves up. So to me, that sounds like they was having running issues with the engine, and that's probably perfected it. So they're going in the scrap. We've got plain discs that are going to be going on, and basically all new parts. So with all that waffle, let's get rebuilding these.
Have the strangest feeling, don't know what to believe in. Cause every time you touch me, I can't control my body.
It's really an amazing bit of design because it just absolutely baffles me how literally an L piece of metal with a spring on it can adjust the idle of the engine, whereas now obviously it's all computers, but you just look at how mechanical this is and how many little springs and little valves there is. So much to go wrong, yet when they worked, they were so reliable.
I am stuck in a dreaming, I can't help what I'm feeling. I don't know if I'm breathing when you are with me, my heart is beating. I am stuck in a dreaming, I can't help what I'm feeling. I don't know if I'm breathing when you are with me, my heart is beating. I'm giving up, getting into you. 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 It's like we're in the moon.
Okay, so what I've done, I've put the carburetors back on the MGB manifold. I'm now going to take a set of digital calipers, I'm going to measure the throttle linkages on this manifold, and then going to write that number down, take these carburetors off, transfer them onto the mini manifold, measure them again with the calipers, and then hopefully if I deduct the difference and chop them down, they should fit. That's how I've basically interpreted it anyway. And other than that, it's going to be a load of guesstimation, but let's give it a whirl. Right, we've hit a few problems. Without even taking another measurement, these carburetors are simply sat too close together and my mathematics isn't going to work. And the main reason being, because the throttle linkages are preset with these bits on that are welded where all your cables connect to, and so is this one. So the issue I've got now is I'm going to have to make a custom throttle linkage. And I come up with an idea a second ago with this bolt where I can basically sandwich it across the two at the front, which will then allow these to pull and open. Problem I've got is this bolt slides off under pressure. If that happens whilst I'm driving, obviously I've lost all throttle and the car will come to a stop. So I'm gonna have to do some jiggery pokery, some butchery, and I'm gonna have to try and make something. So as you can see down in this area here, I've put a bolt that goes straight through the metal and I've used 2 nuts to clamp there and a nylock nut on the end. But to do this and to make it all pull in synchronization like that, I've actually had to modify the middle wing. And what I did was I chopped it off. I got a piece of metal that was about roughly that long, and then I drilled 2 holes in it, slid it over the throttle linkages, welded it to the middle, slid the bolt through, clamped it, and basically now both carburetors open at exactly the same time. It was a lot of faffing around, but we got there in the end. So that brings me to the point where I can happily say these carburetors are ready to be fitted to the 1380 engine once it's dropped in the Mini. As you can see, it was a long, painful process to get there, but they look the absolute nuts, and I've loved every second of building these back up, and let's just hope they work. And just before we end, I need to announce that the engine in my red Mini, the 998, that runs, drives, looks perfect, is a beautiful colour green with silver and black bits, can be won. One of you lucky people can win this engine, and all you've got to do is click the link in the description. Tickets are 50% sold, so there's only 50% remaining, and you have a 1 in 125 chance of winning this engine. Second place will get £100 cash, and third place will get a bundle of stickers. But if you win the engine, I will personally deliver it to you. I'll get the engine to you and you can drop it straight in your car and you should be good to go. So it'd be a perfect win for someone that's restoring a Mini. So click the link in the description if you want to get involved. But other than that, make sure you do everything in style, and I'll see you in the next one, because it's about to get a whole lot better.